rebuilding my life after being betrayed by everyone I loved. Before we begin the story, make sure to subscribe to our channel and never miss more incredible stories every day. A certified letter thudded against my tiny sublet's door like a gavel. Account frozen. Immediate action required. It read, naming me as the authorizer of a transfer I never made. I'm Rowan, 30, the kind of person who keeps receipts face forward and corners crisp. By day, I work in the city archives, where trust is a uniform. White cotton gloves, clean record, chain of custody forms that could outlive us all. If my name smells like fraud, I lose everything. The badge, the shifts, the quiet dignity of unlocking a drawer and knowing history will still be there. I called the credit union. Hold music swallowed my pulse. Security needs to verify your consent. The rep said, calm as a metronome. We have an e-signature and a voice authorization. My own name sounded foreign in her mouth, like a street mispronounced by a tourist. When? I asked. June 12th, 9:17 p.m. for the signature. June 14th, 8:03 a.m. for the call. June 12th, I was cataloging a photo collection, my time-stamped access logs as stubborn as granite. My mother Sylvia texted just then. Graham says not to panic. He knows someone. Graham, our family's polished problem solver and longtime friend who collects favors like cufflinks. Cass, my best friend, chimed in. Keep it low-key, okay? No posts. Graham will handle optics. Optics. My rent was due and a card declined at the corner bodega while I bought ramen and tape. I pressed my thumb into the letter's raised seal and felt the room tilt. If this traveled past clerks and his supervisors, the archives would whisper my name like a cautionary tale. I opened a clean notebook, wrote today's date, and underlined it twice. The first line read, freeze. Call logs. Who touched my name and with what device? Then Sylvia called to say Graham thought I should disappear for a while. Before the split, Graham was the helpful uncle without the blood. Polished shoes, punctual compliments, a calendar that always found time for lunch with kiddo. He guided refinancing, nudged donations, introduced his favorite estate planner like a magician revealing a dove. Sylvia relied on him after Dad died, one signature at a time until help hardened into habit. Cass was my cathedral during those years. Cheap coffee, long walks, the kind of laughter that neutralizes a storm. You're responsible to a fault, she'd tease, snapping my rubber bands into a neat pile. 2 weeks before the letter, Graham hosted a check-in at his co-working space. The glass walls breathed rehearsed warmth. Your emotions seem elevated lately, he said gently, sliding tissues toward me like a stage cue. Sylvia squeezed my knee. Cass stared into her tea. Maybe you could step back for a bit, Graham suggested. No big announcements, just space. He said disappear the way people say detox. It'll help optics, Cass added, repeating the word like it paid rent. Rowan, honey, Sylvia whispered, no drama. No drama is what people ask for right before they create some. I stared at Graham's planner, color blocks named for clients, and a repeating entry titled Sylvia, Advisory. On the way out, the receptionist smiled too long. You're the archivist, right? She said. Graham loves your attention to detail. My skin prickled. In the parking lot, Cass hugged me perfunctorily and said, just breathe and trust the process. Process, optics, disappear. Soft words that bruise quietly. The night I moved into the sublet, a neighbor's TV bled laughter through the wall while I labeled 2 boxes, keep and prove. I thought of how archivists save what the world tries to misplace. The next morning, Graham texted, remember, off-grid for a week is wiser for everyone. Exile is folding your life into 3 grocery bags and a backpack that squeaks. My sublet had a mattress that remembered other bodies and a fridge that hummed like it apologized. I stretched my paychecks like taffy. The credit union freeze meant exact cash and coins dug from old coat pockets. The archives cut one of my late shifts, pending review of a complaint, a sterile sentence that stains. Who shows up? Not many. Sylvia forwarded me recipes for budget meals and a photo of a sunset captioned perspective. Graham sent me an article about resilience with the line, leverage adversity, highlighted. Cass ghosted for 3 days and then appeared with kombucha and platitudes. You're spiraling, she said. Graham's doing what he can. She lowered her voice. Maybe delete your old tweets, just in case. I set alarms to call the credit union at off-peak times. I wrote a ledger of humiliations that might matter later. May 29th, card declined. June 2nd, anonymous email to work alleging chain of custody sloppiness. June 4th, unknown number asking for voiceprint verification. I documented breathing, too, because exhale is cheaper than panic. Rent loomed. The landlord left a reminder with the tact of a parking ticket. I sold a spare camera. I canceled streaming. I kept the one luxury of printer ink because printing receipts is how I stay alive. On a Thursday, the archive's head of security, Mr. Albright, called me in. "We received a transcript of a call," he said. "Sounds like you. You authorized a donor to deliver boxes unscheduled." The donor's name was familiar, one of Graham's golfing companions. My jaw clicked. "I was on lunch when that call happened," I said. "We have badge logs." He nodded slowly, filing away my certainty like a paperclip. That night, a text from an unknown number said, "Your voice gets things done when you're brave." The red flags waved like matador capes. I woke to an alert. New device signed in. Rowan iPhone, Los Gatos. I live 3,000 miles from Los Gatos. Then an edited banking alert popped up, the subject line intact, the body altered to summarize a transfer you initiated. I compared headers. One aligned with the credit union's SPF, the other failed like lipstick outside the lip. Someone was forwarding and forging with unsettling fluency. At work, a rumor skittered down the stacks. Rowan mixed up accessions. Rowan lost a donor's trust. Rowan cried in the stairwell. I hadn't. "You okay?" Albright asked. "You look hunted." "I'm documenting," I said, and he grunted approval. In the evening, Sylvia called. "Graham says there's chatter in the neighborhood," she murmured. "He'll handle optics if you keep still." "I've been still," I said, like prey. She sighed, a sound like lace tearing. A minute later, Cass messaged, "A friend heard you had a meltdown at the co-op." I typed, "I wasn't there," and deleted it. Returning home, I found a pink slip under my door. Delivery attempted, signature required. The sender was a boutique lender I'd never met. My stomach iced over. I went online from the library computer, pulled my credit reports, and found 2 inquiries marked soft, dated the last 2 Fridays. Both traced to a firm where Graham moonlights as strategic consultant. I printed, circled dates, underlined times. At the sublet, my neighbor's cat stared from the hall like a furry judge. I didn't authorize anything. I told a creature who didn't care. I lined up the pages on the floor until patterns emerged. Fridays, lunch hours, numbers ending in 0319, the co-working Wi-Fi name showing up in a calendar invite forwarded to me by accident. Then the credit union emailed a final reminder to upload my ID to confirm your consent. I called Sylvia first. "Don't make mountains," she said, voice papery with fatigue. "Graham says lender verifications are routine. They're routine when they're real." I replied, counting to 4 on each inhale. She flinched at the edge in my tone. "You sound unstable," she whispered, the learned word heavy with judgment. Graham followed with a smooth voicemail. "Rowan, I'm steering this. Silence is strategy. Trust me. Strategy is what predators call your obedience." Cass FaceTimed from her kitchen while stirring something green. "He's trying to help," she said. "We can't burn bridges. Sylvia needs him." "And what about me?" I asked too loud. She lowered her gaze. "You're strong. You'll land." When people call you strong, they're often handing you the heavier bag. I opened a fresh notebook with grid pages and began a ledger, columned like a chapel. Date, time, who, what, device, location, witness. I wrote in block letters to resist the urge to apologize with cursive. June 12th, 9:17 p.m. E-signature. June 14th, 8:03 a.m. Voice authorization. June 16th, 3:11 p.m. Soft inquiry, firm, North Bay Strategic. June 16th, 3:19 p.m. Text from unknown. Your voice gets things done. I stapled the credit union's header-confirmed email to the page and highlighted the upload your ID links mismatch domain. At closing, Albright slipped me a photocopy. "Visitor log," he said. "Graham came by last week, asked for you. I said you were off-site." My ribs tightened. Why visit my work if not to plant a rumor or fish for schedules? On the way home, I passed Graham's co-working and noticed the receptionist pinning a sticky note to her monitor. Rowan, call back. I stepped inside, set my phone to record my own voice, and asked, who requested that? She glanced at the hallway, then whispered, Graham said you'd be stopping by to forward any verifications. A minute later, my phone buzzed with a voicemail that sounded like me authorizing everything. I saved the voicemail and ran it through my cheap audio editor. The cadence was mine, but the breaths were wrong, as if borrowed from a louder person and pasted where my pauses usually live. The transcribed sentence read, yes, I, Rowan, authorized the transfer for the townhouse renovations. Townhouse renovations. Sylvia's place under construction, project shepherded by Graham. I logged the timestamp, June 14th, 8:03 a.m., and the callback number ending in 0319. I called the lender from the library's public desk phone and asked for a copy of any signed consents under my legal name. A polite woman said, we have an e-signature from a Gmail address with a period added, plus a driver's license upload queued but incomplete. I asked for the device info. iPad Pro, serial ending in Q9F, she said. My scalp prickled. Graham flaunts an iPad with a case monogrammed like a school blazer. Cass texted mid-call. Sylvia's freaking. Graham says stop poking. He'll fix it Monday. Fix is such a generous word for Barry. That evening, a volunteer coordinator from the community center emailed me. Confirming your Thursday talk? I never booked one. Attached was a PDF flyer. Rowan Lane, preserving personal archives. At the bottom, tiny sponsor logos included North Bay Strategic and the credit union. Someone was building a stage where my mouth could be requisitioned again. I printed the flyer with system headers and circled the uploader's IP, the co-working's network, captured in the PDF properties. I walked past the boardwalk lights and tasted metal. The ocean kept doing what oceans do, erase and return, and I hated how obvious that metaphor felt even to me. I turned back when the wind made my eyes smart and wrote one sentence at the top of the page. I am not going to disappear for anyone's optics ever again. Then I saw Graham's calendar update labeling me, confirmed speaker, consent Q&A, scheduled for Thursday night. I spent Monday stitching a path through every place my name had appeared without me. First stop, the credit union, where a patient fraud officer named Halliday walked me through the access notes on my file. We can disclose metadata about the session, she said, but recordings require a subpoena. She printed a summary, June 12th, 9:17 p.m. E-signature from a co-working iPad, June 14th, 8:03 a.m. Voice authorization enrolled earlier on the same device. You didn't do this, she added, tapping the device ID line. I asked for a preservation request number. She wrote it on letterhead and stamped it like a small rescue boat. Second stop, the co-working lobby. The receptionist, Raya, silver nail polish, checked a sticky note and hesitated. I'm not supposed to, she began, then lowered her voice. Graham said to route any consent emails to his folder, not yours. He has a Thursday night event on the calendar with your name on it. My palms prickled. Who booked the room? North Bay Strategic, she said, with two guests, Sylvia Lane and Cass Romero. Both people I loved most, RSVP'd to hear me validate a crime. I stepped outside and recorded the hallway art, the clock, the citrus cleaner smell, proof I was here, not consenting. Third stop, the community center that would host the talk. The volunteer coordinator, Lila, recognized me from the PDF flyer. Excited for Thursday, she beamed. Graham said you'll cover consent best practices. I asked to see the rental agreement. The signature stung, a font I'd never used, from the co-working IP. Lila frowned at my face and admitted Graham had vouched, offering his credit card to hold the room. I photographed the agreement with the kiosk clock and texted it to myself and Albright. Back at the sublet, I taped a small war room. Dates marching, names repeating, Thursday circled. Cass finally replied to my last 3 messages with one line. Thursday will clear the air. I deleted 10 drafts, then wrote. Who benefits from my silence? No answer. I brewed tea and let it go cold while my mind rebuilt bridges I refused to cross. By dusk, my plan had a backbone. Arrive with a witness, Vega's letter, and timestamps that outstare charm. Then the receptionist whispered, someone else asked to collect your ID Thursday night. Raya's whisper reconfigured Thursday into an ambush. If someone collected my ID on site, the fake talk would become the point of no return, the moment where my face and voice soldered to their paperwork. I needed witnesses and a paper perimeter. I called Attorney Vega's office and reached a paralegal named Boone who sounded allergic to adjectives. Bring headers and device logs, Boone said. We'll draft a preservation letter for the credit union, the lender, and the venue. I emailed scans, then walked to the credit union to file a fraud affidavit in person, date stamped beside a wall clock that ticked steadily. Halliday said, we'll freeze all outbound transfers, require in-branch ID, and flag voiceprint use. I asked for a second printout of the device fingerprint tied to the June 12th session. The line ending Q9F stared back like a culprit. At the archives, Albright reviewed our visitor cameras. Graham had indeed stopped by the previous week, hovering near the public phones, leaving with nothing but a smile. I added that to the ledger with my square, stubborn handwriting. Cass texted a selfie from Sylvia's townhouse. Paint samples fanned like playing cards. She's anxious, Cass wrote. Thursday helps everyone. I typed, helps who? And watched the typing bubbles appear and vanish like a weather pattern. I spent the afternoon building a kit. Copies of every document, a pocket recorder for my own sentences, a simple sign that read recording in progress placed face down and less needed. I packed 2 pens, a notary contact, and a list of questions for Graham that could be answered only with verifiable facts. At dusk, I met Lila at the community center and asked to test the projector. She agreed and left me alone in the room. I photographed the empty chairs, the system clock on the laptop, and the upload portal the flyer used. On the login screen, the default email auto-filled with my address, plus a stray period. The browser offered to save a password it imagined. I froze, then captured the suggestion box with my phone. Metadata doesn't care about charisma. It collects like sediment until the story hardens. As I left, I recognized Sylvia's laugh in the hallway, a bright sound I grew up chasing. Sylvia stepped inside with Graham behind her and said, we should talk. Sylvia's "we should talk" arrived like a velvet rope across a hallway. We sat in the empty multipurpose room, the projector's fan breathing softly. She smoothed her cardigan, a nervous metronome. Graham says you're overwhelmed, she began. Thursday will give people confidence again. Confidence in what? I asked. In a lie that needs my mouth to stand up? Graham raised both palms as if blessing bread. We've all been under strain, he said. Let's keep it constructive. Rowan, a short, clear consent statement will resolve the chatter. We'll tidy the accounts afterward. After you cement the transfers? I asked, sliding a copy of the device fingerprint across the table. Q9F, I said. Your iPad. The voiceprint came from it, too. His smile thinned. Tech is messy, he said. IPs get shared. Devices get borrowed. Notarizations don't, I replied. So here's the plan. I laid out my kit. A letter from Attorney Vega citing preservation and potential tortious interference. A fraud affidavit filed with the credit union. Photos with visible clocks. The community center rental showing an IP from your co-working Wi-Fi. A visitor log from the archives. And a printed ledger with witnesses. Tomorrow at 10, I said, we meet the credit union's fraud officer and Vega together. If Thursday proceeds, it proceeds under oath and recorded. Sylvia's face crumpled and steadied. Rowan, she whispered, this is public. Privacy ended when you routed my life through Graham's calendar, I said, gentler than it reads. Graham gathered the papers, shuffled, found no safe corner to grip. You're escalating, he warned. I'm documenting, I said. You can attend and explain your honest mistakes. Sylvia touched my sleeve. Please don't humiliate us. Truth humiliates itself or not at all, I said. 10 a.m. I collected the pages, slid them into a folder, and stood. Graham's eyes went briefly flat, predator blue in the projector glow. Careful, kiddo, he murmured. People remember who sets fires. I wrote his sentence into my ledger under quotes, because Ash often testifies. Outside, Cass waited by the door and said, you're making this worse. Cass's accusation landed where friendship used to cushion the fall. Graham's trying to keep Sylvia from a breakdown, she said, twisting her keys. You torch him publicly, you torch her, too. He's holding the match, I said. I'm moving the curtains back. She stared at the folder under my arm. You're addicted to receipts, she said, half awe, half contempt. I'm addicted to living with my own name, I replied. We walked to the parking lot in a silence that scuffed. Cass finally said, he fronted me money, okay? For my deposit. I'm repaying it. He said helping him help you would speed it up. Lightning forked behind my eyes. Bridge money, I said. From where? She looked away. North Bay. He said it was fine. He said you knew. North Bay, the firm behind my soft inquiries. I breathed in the smell of cleaner and dust. You believed him, I said, not a question. I thought you were strong, she shot back, and I counted to 4 again. Tomorrow, I said, you'll see the screens. Bring your repayment receipts if you have them. Her eyes went wet and mean. You'll burn every bridge and then call it healing, she said, and walked away. I sat in my car until the clock rolled past midnight, then texted Boone at Vega's office. Confirm 10 a.m. Plus credit union fraud officer plus recording where legal. Boone replied with 2 words that tasted like steel, be early. In the morning, I wore the black shirt I use on days when a verdict might happen. Halliday had reserved a glassed conference room. A small placard read fraud review. Vega arrived in a gray suit that swallowed adjectives, followed by Boone and a rolling case. At 9:58, Sylvia and Cass slipped in together, eyes bright with fear. At 10:01, Graham breezed in, apology smile tuned to the room. Let's be efficient, he said. We're all busy. Vega clicked the recorder on. Please state names for the record, she said. Halliday mirrored her calm, logged into the system, and opened the access log I already knew by heart. Then Halliday enlarged the device map and said, this one is yours. Halliday's cursor circled the device fingerprint ending in Q9F, then traced a tidy trail. June 1st voiceprint enrollment, June 12th e-signature, June 14th authorization call. Each log showed the same iPad model, same OS version, same public IP used by Graham's co-working space between 8 o'clock and 9 a.m. We also flagged a save credential for a Gmail variant of Rowan's address, Halliday said, highlighting the extra period. Boone slid Vega's letter across the table. Preservation demands to the credit union, North Bay Strategic, and the community center. We request immediate suspension of any transaction tied to those credentials, Vega said. Graham leaned back. You can't infer intent from IP alone, he said smoothly. Halliday nodded. Which is why we also have an in-branch photo of the device used to enroll the voiceprint, she said, opening a thumbnail. A security still appeared, Graham at the kiosk, iPad propped, the reflection of his case's monogram a bright coin. Sylvia made a small animal noise. Cass covered her mouth. Graham kept smiling like an actor whose line arrived late. This is a misunderstanding, he said. Rowan asked me to assist while they regrouped. I asked you to stop routing my life through your calendar, I said. Boone projected the in-branch still again. Lila read the date aloud. The donor whispered Jesus. Vegas summarized. Forged signature, voiceprint enrollment, scheduled public consent, event, attempted ID capture. We'll be filing, she finished, and advising law enforcement. Graham's charm flickered. Sylvia, he said, turning. Tell them about the townhouse invoices. Sylvia's hands shook. He said we had to move funds before penalties, she whispered. He said Rowan agreed. Halliday clicked another tab. Pending outbound wires, now frozen. We're not accusing, she added, tone gentle. We're preserving facts. Vega closed the folder with a sound like a gavel. Rowan will not attend Thursday's event, she said. Any attempt to impersonate will be recorded. I watched Graham's eyes for the first unguarded thing and found it. Not fear, not guilt, annoyance at being interrupted. He turned his phone face down and muttered, we'll do this my way anyway. Thursday came anyway because days do, indifferent to ambush or rescue. Vega advised staying out of the hall until called. Boone arrived early and set up a small printer that spat out timestamps like teeth. Lila opened the room, cheeks pink. We're still a go unless you say otherwise, she whispered. I said, we're documenting. She nodded with the relief of someone who prefers rules to charisma. At 6:05 p.m., people drifted in. Neighbors in sandals, a donor from the archives, 2 men in golf shirts. Sylvia sat near the aisle, twisting her ring. Cass hovered at the back, pale. Graham took the front with a microphone he didn't need. Thank you for coming, he began. to learn how consent protects our community. My stomach turned. Vega stood and raised a hand. Before any presentation, she said, we have preservation notices to serve. Graham tried to wave her down. Boone read the notices into the mic, then connected the laptop to the projector. The screen filled with the portal Graham had planned to use for ID verification. Boone logged into the admin view using credentials the venue provided to us for testing and opened the audit trail. Clicks echoed like metronome beats. The room watched lines appear. Device Q9F, IP address for the co-working space. 3 attempts to upload an ID labeled Rowan_Lane. JPG. Boone enlarged the tiny camera reflection in a test image. The monogram on Graham's case winked like a signature he'd forgotten how to hide. Murmurs sharpened. Lila covered her mouth. The donor from the archives shifted 3 seats away from Graham as if distance could disinfect. Vega spoke without heat. This pattern matches the bank logs. Any further attempt to collect an ID tonight will constitute a new act of fraud. Cass whispered, "Oh my God," and looked at me with something like apology and something like fear for herself. Sylvia stood again, eyes glassy. Graham's smile calcified into a dare. "Rowan," he said brightly, "for the record, do you consent to clearing the air?" "I consent to the truth," I said, and nodded to Boone to play the voicemail. The room fell silent as my forged voice said, "Yes, I authorize everything." The voicemail echoed thin and wrong, a ventriloquist using my name like a glove. People looked from the screen to my face and back, as if comparing fingerprints. Vega paused the audio and displayed the waveform beside a recorded sentence I made that morning for control. The differences were obvious even to civilians. Cut breaths, spliced cadence, slightly hotter room tone. Graham tried one last pivot. "I enrolled Rowan's voiceprint to protect them," he lied, voice smoothing to a politician's finish. "They asked me to help manage their affairs." Boone projected the in-branch still again. Lila read the date aloud. The donor whispered, "Jesus." Sylvia pressed both hands to her mouth. I tried not to look at her because I needed to stand up straight. Security escorted Graham outside to wait with 2 board officers called by the venue just in case. Cass stayed seated, shaking. "He said it was temporary," she whispered. "He said he'd pay the deposit back once the transfer cleared." I nodded once because I had room for only one grief at a time. After the crowd dripped out, Vega turned to me. "We file tonight," she said. "Emergency injunctive relief in the morning." At home, the sublet felt less like exile and more like a clean start with peeling paint. I slept 4 hours, woke at 3, and wrote a list titled after. Call the credit bureaus for extended fraud alerts. Replace my number. New passwords. Freeze my reports. P.O. Box. Text from Albright. Board notified. "We stand by you." Text from Sylvia at 5:11 a.m. "I'm sorry. I wanted to believe." At 9:20, the credit union emailed. Outbound wires canceled. Notes added. In-branch only for any change. At noon, Cass sent screenshots of her repayment to North Bay. A thin absolution, but a direction. The courthouse smelled like paper and solemnity. Vega filed. The clerk stamped. The day rearranged itself around new facts. I walked back into sunlight that felt complicated and honest all at once. Then my landlord slipped a notice under the door labeled, "Correspondent, Rowan Lane." The notice turned out to be Graham's civil jab, posturing about reputational harm to discourage the criminal side. Vega drafted a reply that stapled truth to every paragraph. I spent the next week building a life with locks. New number, new email, password manager with diceware phrases so ugly they were beautiful. A credit freeze across all bureaus, fraud alerts that pinged my phone and Boone's. I opened a P.O. box and felt ridiculous until the clerk winked like we shared a veteran secret. Sylvia moved into a short-term rental 2 bus lines from me. The townhouse a pause diagram with wires exposed. She cried the first time we ate takeout on her floor and then asked for a script when Graham called. "Say, I will not discuss finances without my attorney," I coached, writing it on a card. Cass sent a 3-page apology that tried to be a map. I read it twice and wrote back one sentence. "Boundaries are the only apology I can trust." I set up 2 therapy sessions a week for a month and practiced new muscles, saying no, letting silence sit, closing tabs that begged for doomscroll. At the archives, Albright restored my late shift and left a pack of cotton gloves on my desk like a medal for quiet wars. I made small wins ceremonial. A plant that kept living, a meal prep twice, a bank app that stayed boring. On July 8th, the court granted a temporary restraining order limiting Graham's contact and forbidding any ID collection under my name. Lila mailed me a handwritten note that said, "Rules 1 tonight," which I pinned beside my ledger. Boone compiled a binder for the criminal case. Vega prepped the civil. I traveled exactly nowhere and felt newly expansive, as if square footage were moral, not physical. Sylvia texted photos of blue tape on her walls, choices she would make without a committee. When I slept, I dreamed of timestamps marching into a courtroom and saluting. I reported the calls, logged the minutes, and saved the carrier record. Boone reminded me that harassment often spikes before quiet, like a storm clearing its throat. I wrote a new header in my ledger, post-event noise, and felt my handwriting steady into confidence. Then a block number rang twice and left heavy breathing, nothing else. I used to think rebuilding meant running until the old life couldn't catch me. It turns out it means standing still long enough to sort screws by size, then choosing what holds. Documentation didn't make me lovable, it made me free. A ledger isn't romance, but it's a promise to your future self. I will not abandon you to someone else's charisma. If you're watching this with a knot in your gut because your name is misbehaving in other people's mouths, start with 3 actions tonight. 1. Print or photograph everything with visible clocks, headers, portals, devices, forms. 2. Freeze your credit and add fraud alerts. Write down the request numbers. 3. Build a witness circle of 1 to 3 people who care more about facts than feelings. If nobody qualifies, hire one: an attorney, a notary, a clerk who loves rules. Ask your bank for IP logs. Ask your employer for access reports. Speak in sentences that can be stapled to a form. When someone says optics, ask whose eyes they mean. When someone says privacy, ask who benefits from the dark. Sylvia and I take walks on the boardwalk now, not to perform forgiveness, but to practice boundaries. Sometimes Cash joins us, carrying coffee, talking about repayment plans and therapy, not promises. The townhouse hums with electricians who wait for signed change orders, not nods. The archives smell like paper and patience. I live where my name is boring again. I still tape receipts in straight lines because straight lines help me breathe. On the day the injunction became permanent, I bought a small cake and wrote "Continue" on it in clumsy icing. We ate it on Sylvia's rental floor and laughed when the frosting stained our fingers teal. The ocean kept erasing and returning, but now I understood. Erasing is not forgetting. It's creating space for something sturdier. If betrayal found you, remember, you don't have to become hard to become whole. You just have to become documented. And when the phone buzzed again, I finally let it ring unanswered.